Hello everyone, this is Kanu Bhutani here, and today we will be seeing some very important questions for business analysts on card payments. So let's go on to the first question. So the first question is, what is your experience with payment systems and how they could contribute to improving them in their previous roles? Or in your previous roles. So the thing is that here the interviewer wants to ask that in your previous role as a business analyst, how and what was your contribution? So as a business analyst, in the previous roles, the first thing is doing the analysis. A thorough analysis was and is to be conducted by a business analyst of the existing payment system. So here what a business analyst will do, he will be the person who will be conducting the analysis on the current payment system. He will identify its strengths, weaknesses, opportunities for improvement. Then I would gather the data and the feedback from stakeholders, including customer payment providers and internal teams. The next is defining the payment system requirements. Based on the analysis, the business analyst, I would be defining the payment system requirements that will be including the functional and the non-functional requirements, the user stories, the acceptance criteria, and then I would also ensure that the requirements are clear, measurable, and aligned with the business objectives. The third one is collaborating with the cross-functional teams, the most important thing by a business analyst. So, a business analyst, I would be working with cross-functional teams like developers, the testers, the product owners, the designers, and to ensure that the payment system meets its requirements and it is delivered within time and within budget. The fourth one will be to identify and resolving the issues. So through the development process, I would identify and resolve the issues related to the payment system. Then I would be troubleshooting the issues and ensure that the payment system which is there is stable enough to and secure and compliant with the regulations. Then comes conducting the UAT. So as a business analyst, I would conduct a UAT and ensure that the payments systems they meet the requirements and it is easy to use for the customers. And also, I would gather the feedback and make any necessary adjustments to the payment system. And the final one is monitoring. So after doing so much of work, I will see that the payment system is launched, and then I will start monitoring its performance and start gathering the feedback from different stakeholders. So this would identify the opportunities for improvement and make recommendations for further enhancements to the payment system. This is the way I will be working in any payment system, and with my experience and previous experience, I would give the inputs to the team, and we'll see that the payment system which is there is in a proper shape. So moving on to next question. So the question here is, can you explain the difference between the credit card and the debit card and how they are processed differently in the payments industry? So there are two cards, as we know, credit card and debit card, and the financial institution has to, in a credit card, a payment card which allows you, the card holder, to borrow money from financial institutes up to a certain limit and to make the purchases and or withdraw cash. So when the card holder uses the credit card, they are essentially borrowing money from the credit card issuer and are required to pay back with interest, right? So the credit card issuer charges interest on the outgoing balance and typically on the monthly basis and until the balance is paid off. But on the other hand, when the debit card comes into picture, the payment card that allows the cardholder to access their own funds in the bank, which is there, and when the cardholder uses this debit card, the funds are immediately deducted from their bank account, and there's no borrowing involved. So, in terms of how these credit and debit cards are processed differently in the payment systems, there are following key differences. So, the first one is authorization. So, in authorization, what happens that in when a credit card transaction happens, the credit card issuer checks the card holder's credit limit, available credit, and other factors to determine whether the transaction can be authorized. Okay, but in debit card, what happens? In debit card, it is processed and the funds are immediately verified for availability in the card holder's bank account. And if the funds are not enough, we will get the message that the funds are not there. So that's the difference between credit card and debit card for authorization process. The second comes payment fees. The payment fees is the credit card issuers charge merchants a processing fee, typically a percentage of the transaction amount for every credit card transaction processed. Whereas debit card transactions, on the other hand, often has the lower processing fees as they do not involve borrowing the money and are typically processed through different networks. Then it is liability of fraud. In the case of credit card, the fraud, the card holder is generally not liable for fraudulent charges beyond a certain amount as long as they report the fraud in a timely manner. But in contrast to credit card, the debit card, the fraudulent, they are liable for the full amount of the fraudulent transactions depending on when it is reported. Okay. Then comes rewards. On credit card, the rewards and benefits are often such as cashback or points for using the card, as well as some benefits of the travel insurance or extended warranty protection. But in debit cards, what happen? The rewards and benefits are typically less, and they are offered than by the credit card. So these way we see that these are some of the different features and processes, how the processing transaction happen on credit and debit cards. The next question is, have you worked on any projects related to mobile payments, and how did you approach the requirement gathering process for these projects. So there is a mobile payment projects in which I was working, and we had to gather the requirements for that. So being a business analyst, it's important first to understand the user needs and expectations. Okay. And to do this, we need to conduct a user research and gather the feedback through the surveys, interviews, and focus groups. This can help us to identify pain points in the existing payment processes and opportunities to improvement. Okay, so how can we get there? But the main other thing is the key stakeholders. You must also identify the key stakeholders. Now, who will be the key stakeholders in mobile payment processes will be financial institutes, the merchants, and the end users. So it is important to gather the requirements for each of these stakeholders and balance their need to create such a mobile solution, payment solution that works for everyone. So to do so, we have to gather the requirements. So gathering the requirements, the first one is interface, the user interface and the user experience, in which we say UX and UI. Now see, it's a mobile payment system, means mobile is such a small device. So it is very important that your UI, the interface should be easy to use, and the experience of using that user interface should be optimized because it is a mobile device. The second one is security. So you have to protect the sensitive financial data, even if it is working on mobile phones, no problem. You have to give encryption and two-factor authentication and tokenization for that. The third one is payment types. You have to give them that it will accept the credit cards, debit cards, mobile wallets, bank transfers, or any payment other processing cards. So all that options you have to see that it is having. Then comes integration with existing systems. Now you have to also ensure that your mobile payment solution is integrated with the existing merchant systems, payment gateways, and financial institutes which are going to pass your payments. So that also requirement is needed. And then fifth one is compliance. So you have to comply it with the regulatory reporting and the industry standards such as PCI, DSS, and GDPR. So these are the ways to collect the requirements which are, you will see, are functional and are non-functional in nature. But overall, these requirements are required to give the thorough understanding of the user needs. Moving on to next question. The question is, what is your experience with payment systems and how have you contributed to improving them in your previous roles? Now, this is again a question where interview wants to know what you have done. So, you have to give your reply as a business analyst. What is your experience with the payment systems, and how could you stay up to date with the latest industry trends and regulations in the payments and cards domain? So the first one is you need to attend the industry conferences. This is very important, and it is an excellent way to stay up to date with the latest industry trends and regulatory changes. See, you are a business analyst, you have to work with business guys, You have to work with the clients and SMEs. So it is very important for you to also attend the conferences that where you can learn the uh, industry trends and like Money 2020, the payment card industry, the Security Standards Council, the National Automated Clearing Housing Association. And once you attend those conferences, you will come to know about the latest trends, technologies, and regulatory changes that are happening. The second best way to do is read the publications. You have to start reading the payment source, the Nielsen report, the bank innovation, which can help you to stay up to date to these emerging technologies. Then it is like participate. You have to participate in the professional groups. Being a business analyst, you have to attend the professional groups. You have to join there. You have to understand what other people who has industry specific webinars and who write the white papers and the discussion forums, and you have to attend those. Then it is important is training sessions. You have to attend the training sessions on topics like data analytics, digital payments, blockchain, etc., etc. And then comes collaboration with the industry experts such as payment processors and the regulators. And so by building all these relationships with all these experts, you can gain the insights in emerging trends. Okay. Can you describe a time when you identified a problem with a payment system or process and proposed a solution to address it? Okay, as a business analyst, while working with a payment system in retail company, I identified that the current payment system was causing the delays and errors in processing refunds. The customers were experiencing delays in receiving their funds, and the company was receiving a high volume of customer complaints. And that is the time when you have to address that issue. And to address that issue and to solve the solution, the first point is RCA, root cause analysis. You have to do the root cause analysis of the payment system and process and identify any bottlenecks or inefficiencies that have caused this issue and error. The second is develop a new refund processing system that will help identify these issues. The new workflow should be designed to streamline the refund processing process and reduce the likelihood of errors. The third one is implementing the new system. The new system that you have thought about, you have to implement that in your workflow in the payment system. This may involve working with the IT team to develop and test the new workflow and integrate that with the existing payment system. Then comes training the customer service executives and representatives on the new refund processing workflow. Training is very important so that they can assist the customers with refund requests and resolve any issues that may arise. Then comes monitoring. You have to keep on monitoring that the new refund processing workflow that you have created is functioning as you intend to, and the customers are receiving their refunds in timely basis. So by implementing such a solution, you can make sure that the delays and the errors that are causing can go. Okay, the next question is, have you worked with any third-party payment providers, and how did you evaluate and select them for integration with your organization's system? So, as a business analyst, I was tasked with evaluating and selecting a third-party payment provider to identify and integrate with their our organization's e-commerce platform. So it was this work was given to evaluate and select the third-party payment. So the way it was done, selection was done was to very first to identify the organization's payment processing needs. As a business analyst, I first identify the organization's payment needs, the payment methods, different types of methods that they want to accept, the countries, and any regulatory requirements that must be met. Then research on the third party payment providers. So once your organization's payment processing needs are clear, you have to identify and research that the third party payment provider which there is it meeting your organization's needs, and then they can use resources such as online payment provider directories, industry publications, and online forums to identify potential providers. Then comes evaluation of your potential payment provider is based on the pricing, the security features, the ease of integration, and customer support. Then comes the proposals. Once you are happy with the things, then you can request the proposal from the payment provider. How much is the price they are telling? And this may involve also reviewing the provider's security and compliance certifications, the financial stability and service level agreements. Once that is done, then the payment providers uh, uh, we have to select, and based on the organization needs which are meeting, and the negotiating contracting terms, the pricing and integration timelines, we can easily define and decide which payment provider to select for our IT department, which will ensure integration is smooth and successful. So these are the steps that can help us to go accordingly. Can you discuss any experiences you have had working on fraud prevention and detection systems in the payments industry, and how you approached these projects? Now, as a business analyst, while working in the payments industry, the fraud prevention and detection systems are very critical, and we have to see that the customers and the organizations are free from any fraudulent activities that are done. So let's consider an example uh, uh, of this fraud prevention which uh, I was doing for a payment industry. So the steps that were involved to protect the fraud, the very first is what? Identifying the types of frauds. This is very common in payment industry, and we have to identify different types of frauds. Every day new frauds come up, but very uh, basic frauds like identifying theft, chargeback fraud, friendly fraud. These are the fraud patterns and techniques that are used by fraudsters to penetrate and do these frauds. Then comes defining the requirements. The business analyst then I will be defining the requirements to prevent these frauds and by identifying the fraud types and patterns. Then I will be working along with fraud prevention team, IT team, and other stakeholders necessary functionality who can provide the data source that can provide an integration requirements. Then comes designing the system. Once all these requirements are collected, we may involve creating use cases, process flows, data models, and other artifacts to guide the development team and the implementation team. Then we have to select the technology. The business analyst also selects the technology which is to be used for fraud prevention and detection system. He can take the help of IT department. He can take the help of people who know which are the preventive tools and technologies and algorithms that are currently used and that are ease of integration and scalable. Then test and deploy. Once you do it, you have done the requirements completed, then you have to do testing, which will involve the functional testing, the performance testing, and acceptance testing. Once testing is done, then and it is deployed in the production system, then you do the monitoring of that system. And if there is any more improvements and chances of improving the system, you can continuously do that. Okay. So the next question is, how have you worked with stakeholders such as banks, credit cards, issuers, and payment networks in your various previous roles, and what challenges have you faced in these collaborations? So, as a business analyst working in the payment industry, there are various stakeholders involving in the process, including banks, credit issuers, and payment networks. And we have to closely work with those stakeholders to understand their needs, their requirements, and the concerns. So, how we understand that is we have to first conduct the stakeholder analysis. We have to identify the key stakeholders which are involved in project and analyze their needs and motivations and goals. These are very important because they involve conducting interviews, doing the surveys, and focusing on groups with stakeholders to gather their feedback. Once that is done, then as a business analyst, I have to define the requirements. So the stakeholders are the main people who give us what they want, and then we write the requirements for our project based on that. This may also involve workshops and meetings with the stakeholders to identify their needs. Once that is done, then we negotiate the requirements. So this is also one important thing because the stakeholders are mostly the non-technical guys. So there are sometimes some things we can't do. So we have to ensure that the project meets the addressing concerns and constraints, and also it involves the trade-offs and compromises to balance with the competing interest of stakeholders. And then we have to manage the expectations of the stakeholders thoroughly by providing them regular updates on progress, identifying risks and issues, and addressing their concerns and questions that they may have. Once that is done, then there are the challenges that may arise while working with stakeholders in industry, which will include the conflicting priorities, the differing regulatory requirements, and the technical constraints. For example, if the card issuer and has a specific requirements which is around the data elements and that need to be include the transaction messages which may be different from those of the payment networks. So in such case, to facilitate the discussions among stakeholders and find the mutual acceptable solution, we have to have different implementation timelines, and that requires negotiation and coordination. Okay. Okay, the next question is, can you describe a time when you had to balance the needs of different stakeholders in a payment project, and how did you prioritize the competing demands? So I was working in a payment industry with multiple stakeholders, including banks, the payment networks, the merchants, the customers, and each one of them was having different competing needs and different competing demands. And as a business analyst, I had to balance all these and ensure that the project meets its needs of all the stakeholders. So, how did I balance that? The very first thing is you have to identify your stakeholders. Now, there are many business stakeholders, as we mentioned. So, everyone has its own inputs, own outputs they need. So, as a business analyst, you should first identify what stakeholders are and what are their needs, what are their priorities and constraints. Once we do that, then we have to prioritize. Now prioritize the needs. Like you can't take the needs of every stakeholder. So you have to prioritize. Okay, this need is important, and this need is less important or not needed. So and it is to be prioritized. Which needs should be prioritized first? So that also is the work of a business analyst, and he has to weigh the impact of each stakeholder's need. Then, once that is decided, then what you have to do, you have to facilitate the communication with all the stakeholders, explaining them, bringing them on one page, and telling them, okay, this is the reason why you have selected these needs and these things in starting, and why are you giving the prioritization to those things. Once that is done, then you need to seek consensus of your things from each and every stakeholder. They have to give the consensus, okay, move ahead based on project decisions, the scope, timelines, and budget. Then comes, once that is approved, then you have to monitor the progress. The project progress is to be monitored, and the entire project life cycle is to be conveyed to stakeholders. This is the way you have to see that these challenges are met. Then comes the last question, the 10th question. How do you ensure that the payment systems you work with are secure and compliant with industry regulations? And what steps have you taken to mitigate potential risks and threats? So, as a business analyst, I was working on a payment system with a secure and compliant with the industry standards, and uh, it was um, the insights of those were secure and compliant, and what steps did I follow to mitigate that potential risks and threats. The first one is to conduct the risk analysis or assessment. When it comes to you that, okay, this is the risk, at least you should know first where it is the risk, and you may involve system architecture, the processes, the data flows to identify the vulnerabilities and the potential attack vectors. Once you have done that, then you have to stay up to date to the industry regulations, the payment cards industry, the what is the compliance of those regulations and standards. Then comes security. You have to implement the security controls on whatever potential risks and threats are there involved, and implementing encryption, access controls, monitoring and logging, and other security measures. Then you have to conduct the testing, which will certainly involve to identify and control the vulnerabilities that need to be addressed. Then the monitoring of threats. You have to monitor that, okay, so many vulnerabilities we have seen. Is it coming? And if it is coming, then we have to monitor with the suspicious activity or conduct regular vulnerability scans and implement threat intelligence feeds. Then conduct audit. Regular audits have to be conducted in payment systems to remain secure and compliant, and this may involve conducting internal audits with third party audits. System security and compliance can be taken care of. So here we end our 10 questions, most important questions which can be asked in the interviews. I hope it was a very beneficial video. Take care. Thank you very much, and bye bye. See you in the next video. Bye.